Hi there. Nice to see you, everyone. Just connecting, saying hello to all you lovely people all over the world. I'm on a place with a lot of people right now, and so therefore I'm not talking too loudly. Can you hear me okay? Because I really don't want to. Hi, Robin. I really don't want to talk over people here. Hey, Ruth. Shalom. Hi. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all here. I'm excited to offer this tour. I was sort of watching while guiding to my bus. I was watching Finn's tour. I thought he did a great job too, if you were able to catch that. Hi, Darna. So it's nice to see everyone here. I'm in a very unique place. I'm going to do very quick introductions because there's a huge amount I'd like to just squeeze in. Wasn't he brilliant? It was lovely. I'm a little biased, but it's neat. But I am on something here that I've been so excited to see for a long time, ladies and gentlemen. And why, hey, Robert, have I been excited to see it? Well, I was meant to see this 2 years ago. Janice, I miss you too. Well, ladies and gentlemen, quick hello. If you haven't met me before, my name is Patrick Toomey. I am not from here at all. I'm from Banff in the Canadian Rockies. If you happen to be new here totally to Hago, think of kind of YouTube Live. Now, the chat just flies by. I see quite a few names I recognize, some I don't. Feel free to ask questions, but I say I only see at any given time 3 of the little boxes, so sometimes things just zoom past me. But I am out in the bay here, and I'm in a very, very, very famous harbor. Let me just turn this around for a second, because I am in Plymouth Harbor. Now, where am I standing right at the moment? Well, I am standing right here on the Mayflower 2. Hi, Deanna. Now, this was all, of course, restored. This is an exact copy. It's Mayflower 2, Mayflower 1 eventually, after going back in 1621. It was used just for shipping around Europe and eventually sold for scrap. Now, there's so much to talk about in the little time we have here. And again, I had this trip planned to be here 2 years ago for the 400th anniversary. Obviously, the pandemic changed all of that. So it's a treat to come back. But I'm in the town of Plymouth, Massachusetts. Cape Cod, ladies and gentlemen, where Janice is. Janice, I'm waving to you out there somewhere. Cape Cod's just out there. We came up and off the Cape, easy as can be today. And I've been up to the other museum. It's so nice, Robin. And so I'm just going to jump around chronologically a little bit because there's such an interesting boat right down here. This just sailed over from the UK, sponsored by IBM, but it is called Mayflower 400. This is a state-of-the-art solar ship that crossed the Atlantic in just a few days. The ship I'm standing on, hey Chloe, took 66 days to come across before people landed where I was in P-Town the other day. They first landed over there, went down the coast, and then decided to settle in this harbor because of the abundance, what looked like the abundance of food, and also the fact that what they found here was a village, a Wampanoag, Massachusetts village, but no one was living in it. They saw the structure of agriculture and housing. Now, when I say housing, I've uploaded a few photos from my earlier trip today, so you can download these. Bonjour, Hélène. This is what a Wampanoag house would have looked like, at least for the summer season, for the hunting season and the farming season. It is really, really fascinating. People have lived here for 12,000 years very successfully. So why did the pilgrims, the 102 that came over, why did they arrive here and find no one living there? Well, 1616 is the same time that John Smith came down this coast and he named this harbor Plymouth Harbor. It was actually named by John Smith, Plymouth. The fact that the Mayflower ended up leaving from Plymouth is just sort of a peculiar correlation. The name was already here on a map, but of course the coast had been mapped out, particularly by Samuel de Champlain and the French settlers prior to that. And of course, Quebec City was founded in 1608. However, in 1616, disease hit the Wampanoag people, the Anishinaabe, and all of the Algonquin peoples from this region, and their population was devastated before many of them ever saw a foreign face. So whether the disease came over first with the French or with maybe on that ship that came over with John Smith, it's hard to know. But here we are, and I will promise to walk around so I can give you a full view of it. But I am literally standing up right now on Mayflower 2. And so, of course, the Pilgrims, I know you've probably heard some of the story that they were Christian separatists in the UK. They went off to the Netherlands and didn't really find the home they had hoped to find. Took a ship back to Southampton, but it was so leaky, they then hired this ship. That's actually, Wampanoag fall right under that, Deanna, absolutely, of the indigenous people. They would come out to the coast for fishing, but their farming was excellent. I mean, really good, productive land around here. However, when the 102 pilgrims came over on the first crossing, um, and they landed here, I'll tell you what, I'm going to move around. I'm going to head up off the ship a little bit so I can actually show it off to you. But I just thought it was a fun place to start a visit. So let me make my way up and off here. How's it going? As I want to say a quick hello to everyone. This is Sulem.
Hey, I heard so much about you. Come travel with him.
Yeah. It'd be fun for you to all come. So I'm just going to come up and off the ship. So this came back, of course, and then they had to cancel everything for the 200 or for the 400 way back. They landed probably, and I'll show you Plymouth Rock, of course. That is not noted in their history. So whether the rock is really where they tied up the first ship, hard to say. But they came back. They landed here on the 21st of December and started on Christmas Day building their first houses. Now, what did their early houses look like? Well, once they did a bit better, they ended up with some of these very typical sort of pioneer settlements that you can expect. There was not a great deal of conflict. There was a little bit of conflict, so they built up a guard post. Yeah, Linda, I was just saying I'm not talking too loudly here because I'm surrounded by people who are listening to tours. As soon as I get off the boat, then I can speak up, or off the ship, I can speak up a bit more. But I just didn't want to be yelling around the actual tour guides who are here on the ship. I asked for permission to start my presentation here, which they were all for. Imagine standing up on the top of that, looking for land. Oh, great, Cynthia. Just imagine. So Plymouth here today is also a super appealing place to come. But I just want to cast over here. I want to show you this image down here. To see this little canoe? Now, these are the pre-Columbian canoes that would be used on these waters, principally in salt water. They're made from local trees, maple trees and elm trees. But it's very interesting. I once hung out with an architect professor when I was down in southern Chile, and he had come down to actually study these pre-Columbian halls. But those are hardwoods down there, whereas they're not necessarily hardwoods here. You dig them out and leave them to expand out into a natural canoe form. Some of them were just massive, and they would last for generations. So it's really, yeah, it's a fabulous system. Very different. Is that right, Lynn? Very different from the birch bark canoe, which was a different setup altogether. But I just want to show you. So this is the land of the Wampanoag. This has been part of this whole process of land acknowledgements. Historically, I didn't see these signs around here, and it's lovely to see them now. Just let you take a postcard. There's other people looking, so I don't want to get in their way. So have a look. All right. But if you just want to take a postcard here as well, and just don't want to ask other people to leave. All right. Thank you. Sorry. All right. Now, this, when you talk about some of the settlement, now remember, Jamestown was 1617 to the south. So this wasn't the oldest. This was the final establishment. Yeah, come around that way. This was the final establishment of New England, which is different from Jamestown, right? So a different establishment altogether. But I tell you what, I'm actually going to give you a to-me twist on this one. Hang on for a second. I'm just going to turn this up so I can fit it in. And feel free to take a postcard there and try and read through it. And I have two people, hang on again. I have two people on this real life tour with me right now whose family goes back, I think they said 17 generations, to Brewster. And Brewster was one of probably the lead of the original colony. Now, many more Americans actually will have that heritage because, of course, generations and generations. And you too, Janice. See, 3. There you go. Actually, Janice, it was you I was including in the 2. So from the congregation, the second boat came over 2 years later. When they came over, half the colony had died. Now remember, they started building their houses on Christmas Day. They get winters here, right? By the way, Plymouth is spelled both with an I and a Y. And the fact that we talk about Patuxet now, historically when I came on these tours, we called it the Plymouth Plantation. Of course, the term plantation was very distinctly aligned now with enslavement. And so that's why, for example, Rhode Island changed its name simply to Rhode Island from Rhode Island and Providence plantations. Now, there were distinctly more men than women that came over on the first lot. Then, when the people returned, the next boat was probably 1623, if I'm correct. Another settlement came in. There were about 60 people in the entire colony, but it survived. And it survived, and they learned very quickly to have to farm. So you can imagine now, not everyone was truly a religious migrant here. The first group of pilgrims absolutely were. Afterwards, people came over for economic reasons. That was much more true in Jamestown itself, where they were told they were going to find gold. But if you've ever been on one of my raw history talks about the history of the Spanish in South America, of course, there was silver, a huge, hey, thanks, Lorraine, huge amount of wealth that came out of South America. They came over to the Jamestown area, and there was no gold there at all. What there was, though, was the edible gold, which is corn, right? The great staple of the New World. Here, they had, here they actually had herring as well, which they would catch and use as fertilizer. Really good farming. So imagine what it was like when they came over, started settling here. Now, it's good to remember that, of course, the French were already settled up in Quebec. The British were up in, it's been a little while, thanks. The British were up in Newfoundland, and that was almost entirely fishing. And we know that the Spanish and the Basques came over for fishing up there too. They may have even predated John Cabot coming over there. So this isn't the oldest settlement, but it is the establishment and the creation of what we consider New England. There was a later colony, but just a few years later, up the Boston colony, and then they united and survived as a colony. So, I mean, it really is a rather remarkable story of both hard work, heroism, but let's not lose sight of the fact that there was, in this particular case, I would say an unintentional genocide, whereas in other parts of the Americas, there were very intentional genocides, but an unintentional genocide to be, yeah, I'm walking around, Maria. Me voy al otro lado para la mejor fotografía. No, I'm walking around so I can give you all a proper reveal of the whole ship itself, I promise. Um, and so even like this, and there is a gathering every year here of Native Americans, Indigenous Americans, very much on that December 21st to remember the loss of so much life on this continent. Now, disease had made its way north already into Indigenous populations. So up here in what we consider northern US and Canada, there's somewhere between 2.8 and 5 million people. I know that's a little hard, but it's really hard to measure because populations were just so incredibly devastated. Now, let me just turn around here. I'm trying to find the best place for the photo. And I saw this years ago when I first started guiding tours down here, and then it disappeared. And of course, it was all being set up for the 400. So here we are. You ready for this? Ta-da. That is the actual size. So 66 days to cross. Apparently, the next colonists to come over and join them took nearly 3 months to come across. Let's just have a little. I mean, it's a gorgeous boat. The colors, I honestly surprised me, but they say it's an exact replica, so it would have been that colorful. The reason why you have the new IBM boat coming over called the Mayflower 400 is it's a parallel because the Mayflower itself was considered to be state of the art when it was built. State of the art ability to ride wind. You probably all know it was the Portuguese who um, mastered the triangular sail and be able to tack upwind. They crossed from England. So the very first pilgrims had gone off to the Netherlands, decided that it wasn't right for them to stay there, and then they sailed. They came back to England and their first boat was leaking, and then they hired this one. So it was literally hired. They had enough money and they crossed over and then landed over here 3 months later. They landed over at what is now Provincetown. I showed you the monument to that. They came down the coast and they eventually found the spot, and it makes tons of sense. The place that they came to here. Hey, everyone, you want to say a quick hello to Mary Beth? Isn't it a wonderful photo? So they isn't it a lovely cruise? Yeah, I mean the Queen Mary. My dad actually took one of those ones across out of Galveston. I don't think it was the Queen Mary one, but sailed across to the Azores. Interestingly enough, the next major migration that came to this part of New England were actually um, uh, yeah, I saw that, Michelle. Uh, did the huge migrations of Portuguese who came over here and are still dominant in the fishing industry around this area. So, that's pretty important as a connection. And of course, the Portuguese were wonderful mariners. They just didn't have much of an economy at home. That whole story. And I would suggest some of our excellent guides down there in Brazil to talk about this. But of course, the Portuguese royal family just picked up and left and actually moved to Brazil because it was wealthier. The ship itself. Um, the galleon here is really rather spectacular, and of course they did so much work to bring it back. And like I said, I had planned to be here, so I was so excited when I woke up this morning, knowing I was coming, and I had a reservation to see it. So I had been at the Upper Museum earlier today, the Patuxent Museum. If you just joined on a little bit later, it used to be called the Plantation Museum, but you get a sense of what very new New England would have looked like. You can snap on that photo, thanks Judy, and download it. Feel free to have a look at that and what life was like. Now, it is hot and humid today. I was woken up. Hey, Silke, you have a cool tour on later today. I was woken up at 6:45 this morning when I thought a truck had driven into the side of the hotel, but actually it was thunder. A huge storm system moved over here, and it's getting so humid, I think I'm going to catch a little more rain. But let's keep walking for a little bit because there's so much more to show you, at least in a short period of time. And it is just so fascinating. Memory thunderstorm. I was saying, it really woke me up. I saw some more and that I couldn't figure out. It was the Cape. I to push past it wasn't quite hitting Rhode Island. It was hitting the Cape and then circling around. So yeah, it was a. But you know what? We've had such perfect weather here. I mean, this has honestly been. I designed this tour 3 years ago to do it 2 years ago for the 400th, and now I'm doing it now. And New England has put on the molecular smoke for me. The group has been so well. I'm just enjoying all of the cormorant. You're right. It is. Interestingly enough, now there it's coming back a little bit. I know, yes, I know there have just been yesterday. I guess the whole site went down. It crashed on Finn the other day, so I know that Hago is fully aware of it. The problem is I can't help them with any of it because I'm not a I'm not a tech engineer, so I can see if my reception bars are lowering down. Now, once again, I'm happy to talk louder through here, but once I get around big crowds of people, of course, they have every right to. I'm joining. No, that's great. Then it's good to let me know. It just reminds me to check if I see the reception's on full. Anyway, if you didn't hear me, what I was just telling you about were the winning lottery numbers for tomorrow night, but I've just forgotten them. So hopefully you were able to catch some of it. But here we are in Plymouth itself. I think I'll take you up on the hill for a nice view, but I want to come up to the to the rock itself. And I'm just not going to talk too much just by it because there's so many other people here. It is not written in their records that they actually tied the ship up onto it. So whether this was a later thought, whether it was sort of a declaration, it's sort of hard to say. The Pilgrim Memorial State Park is all down through here. I just got my luck. Take care. Right back where we got off the bus. Yep, yep. Let me come and show you the famous. Come on up. Here we are, everybody. Now I'll try and get a better picture, but there, 16, 20. I'll go around the other side when there's room. You did, Janice, and it was, by the way, because I put this tour up under its own name, it was Janice very kindly sent me that photo. So full photo credit to our friend Janice. Oh, good. I can just get around here. Quick little sneak around for a second. There, I'm just beside my friend Luann here. Look at that. There we are. Everyone take as many postcards as you'd like right here. And then we'll walk up on the hill and have a little look around. So that's spectacular. All right. So hopefully everyone were able to get. I wanted to show you one of the other signs. They have another sign. Let me see if I can just give you a quick postcard over here, and then you can always enjoy this and read it on your own time. So just gonna sneak in here. The Memorial State Park sign. There we are. So that's Plymouth Rock is a symbol for the potential pilgrims saw in America, right? Or Turtle Island, as we call it. So grab a quick postcard there. Okay, but the early life was tough. Now, I was actually talking about this today as well. Thanks, Andrew. Talking about this today a little earlier with my group. Of course, you had these migrations over here, the Pilgrims. Then, of course, when the clearances in Scotland occurred, Lord Selkirk, you had the Scots who were settled quite a lot later, 1789, there in Nova Scotia, New Scotland. But the Selkirk settlement, he had read about, Lord Selkirk was worried about all the people being cleared off the land because it was awful and they were being displaced. Lord Selkirk read about the lands in what is now southern Manitoba, but that was Hudson's Bay Company territory along the Red River. And he thought that would be a place for them to find a new life as farmers, paid for them to not just cross over, they would have come into the Hudson's Bay and then land. And that colony, same thing. First year, half of them died as well. So life would have been very tough. Now, when we're up at the Patuxent Museum there, the people are in style. They're speaking with as best as we can indicate the dialect of the time. So that was an interesting thing. But so I had one of the characters, and she was a young lady who said she came over in 1603 and 20, so 1623, and her father had left on the original Mayflower. And when they arrived, her sister didn't even recognize her father because he was so emaciated. You know, life was tough. Remember, for most of our history, we lived farm to table. Now, the fact that you could fish here made this very sustainable. But coming over and landing in winter here, you get a great big snowstorm. It's a whole different game. Janice actually sent me a photo this morning to share with the group of one of the snowstorms on the Cape, and it's where I live. But nevertheless, you're not growing anything those times of year. I'm just heading up towards the museum, and then we can have some views down over here. I'm going to see the Founders Memorial, which is I think the second largest granite monument in the world. So that's pretty interesting as well. But I do want to come up to the top here. Were you at Thanksgiving here? Oh, isn't it lovely? By the way, one book, and I have mentioned it before, was Bill Bryson's book, Made in America, where he talks about the evolution of the language here in North America. Gracias, Maria. And it is one of those very interesting points. You know, you hear about people coming over, meeting the indigenous population, everyone sitting down and eating together. How did they talk? Well, they had early translators. The evolution of languages is fascinating. Out where I live, it was called Chinook jargon. It was a language, a fur trade language of about 900 to 1,000 words. A mix where I live was Cree, Blackfoot, English, and French. The other one he talks about, Marlene, that I find so interesting in that particular book is why, of course, when Americans eat, if they eat formally, they cut their food and then switch their fork over. And it's because you carried a knife with an extra stab on the end and only ate with your right hand. So it's very interesting. Now, let me come and show you a very, very moving plaque that I wanted to show everyone here. So I'm not going to stand and read the whole postcard. So 1970, Native Americans have gathered at noon on Coles Hill in Plymouth to commemorate a national day of mourning on the U.S. Thanksgiving holiday. You know, so often there are two stories on all these things. If you want a very, very powerful, a very moving TED lecture, or you can find him on YouTube. But Aaron Huey, Aaron Huey, Huey, photographer from Seattle, but he has one about the Black Hills of South Dakota and the establishment of the reservation system. Yep, so I would recommend that. Now, I do want to give you, here is a statue, and this is, of course, your classic images of the sort of, to be fair, this is a grand tribute in 1921, but it's also a little bit of the Voltairean noble savage idea. It is interesting. See, I think I might be able to get you a photo here. I'll just curve away for a second. I'll let them take their photos, and then I'll see if I can get one all for ourselves. Look out into the bay. There we go. So, great Sachin of the Wampanoags, protector and preserver of the Pilgrims. And there was actually, generally speaking, friendship between the two. But remember, what these societies were going through at the point at which the Pilgrims arrived was massive, massive social collapse. Like, if we talk about the Great Hunger thank you, Chloe, thank you. If we talk about the Great Hunger, for example, in Ireland, where something like a third of Irish either died or had to emigrate, even though the country was still producing food. Here, in some cases, societies lost 90% of their population. So, and there is a growing acknowledgement, but they also reunited in a broader sense. Like the Assembly of First Nations in Canada. The houses are lovely. You'll see it's actually, this one has that whaling feel to it. Why do I know that? Well, because of the flat top, and that's where you'd stand up to watch the ships coming back in. And the whalers and the sea captains always built their houses inland because they know how destructive storms could be out at sea. And if you look, this is quite fun. Windows walk, it's lovely, isn't it? I would love to be sitting on the 4th of July on a deck like that, but I am going to be in beautiful Boston. I'm excited. Look at those sandy bays out there, right? And it does remind me because once you came here, the Pilgrims were actually heading for the Hudson River. Again, the coast had been mapped, right? There's a reason why, for example, in Acadia Park, Acadia, Acadie, that was still French Canada. Robin, I'm so excited. Problem is, that's an osprey. It has a fish in its talons. Hello, you beautiful bird. And of course, thank you for the well over 100 people who joined me for my Canada Day talk last night. I know it was very late for those of you in the UK, and I also know people had a horrendous time signing on. So thank you for sticking with it. It was an enjoyable time to share with everyone. I'm just so happy to be down here. Thanks, Pam. I'm so happy to be down here right now. Um, yeah, yes. Like, is that at 10 o'clock? That sounds right to me. And I am staying, I can walk to the State House. So that does appeal to me a lot. Just give you a sense, by the way, we could do now on thanks, Chloe, every one of the tours. Yeah, Deanna, I should be good. I've been going to the airport a couple of times, but that's absolutely something I'd love to go and do. And really, when I put the tour up, I have actually talked to someone in Boston for some different ideas, but it just depends. There's so many different things going on that I really couldn't time it around any specific event. And I did think about staying up and doing one for the fireworks, but I'm always asleep by then. Hey, Tom, yes, Tom, feel free to come walking on that tour. Love your city. Don't love the traffic, but love your city. And I'm looking forward. I'm going to get up there today. So we're going to stay here now for a good couple of hours because this town is just so interesting and appealing. But right here, this is so important. Look at this monument right over here now. This is the next one I wanted to show you. Of the 104, that's so interesting because they're saying 102. These died in Plymouth during the first year. So you are looking across at this memory, and of course, leaving. These first group were leaving, of course, for very much that belief in a place to settle. And they did intend to settle. I mean, it's a big move when you hire the ship. The ship went away in 1621 and it left. You were here. But imagine how many, and just how tragic some of it would have been. I wanted to come back to some of that sea captain, seafarer history, though. If you've known, when I was in Seville, I talked a little bit about it. Here, take a look at this. But if you read the history, for example, of Columbus himself, he probably lived about 55 years. The last 7 or 8 years of his life, is that right, Janice? The last 7 or 8 years of his life, he lived with agonizing, gout because, of course, they had preserved foods, scurvy, and very regularly. Yeah, Karen, I am staying up in the north end. I promise you, I'm going to be. Voy a mangiare italiani. Oh, sorry, my signal just bounced right there. Okay. So here, under the cover of darkness, the fast dwindling company laid their dead, leveling the earth above them, lest the Indians should learn how many were at the graves. So it's interesting. That north side of Boston is, of course, the Italian settlement. Southie is the Irish part. And I do like the Italian food up there. It's funny, we don't have, where I live, a particularly good Italian restaurant. So I do sometimes. I'm actually taking my whole group out for Italian tomorrow night, kind of our last night dinner all together. So that's really fun. Well, the North Church, I was thinking almost of doing the Freedom Walk, but I've been chatting with someone who really is thinking about becoming a guide in Boston. So I think I'm just going to do a nice, fun introduction because it would be so. Boston needs a full-time Hago guide. I mean, it's Boston. There's so much history, and everything around it is so good. Yeah, I know there's Beth down in Salem, so I've been encouraging someone. Hey, Annie, I've been encouraging someone to get a profile up. So ideally, that would be the best thing. And whilst it's so much fun for me to come back here and share all of this, of course, I'm off doing my real life tours as well. Well, yeah. So there's just so much to see and talk about. And Boston, when I do normal city tours of Boston, I bet you do, Karen. I tend to do, of course, the Freedom Walk, and you go up there, and then of course you have to go around the Common. So I'm probably on the 4th going to go across the Common to the State House. Something somewhat predictable, but a good introduction to the city. Today's this rainy day, and then it's meant to be just gorgeous weather again. But let's wander out here a little bit more, just because we're here all together, and it's a real treat to be back here. So for years, I used to do just a day trip. I was telling Janice this the other day. I would leave Boston, come down to here in the morning, and then I'd go to Sandwich and drive out into Chatham, have have lunch, and then come back and do the JFK Memorial. So that was sort of the day trip. Um, and Finchburg, Connor, there's so many. So I have been lucky enough because yesterday I caught up with genuine old friends from Rhode Island. They came with me on a tour in Ireland 25 years ago, and they've been on, I don't know, 11 trips with me. I guess whole student groups, and it was so much fun. And they've actually, their son lives up in Western Mass, and I've stayed with him before. There's so much to explore, and honestly, I'd love to have a bit more time just up in Vermont as well. Um, so that it's all pretty interesting stuff. But let's come down um, and have a look. Well, the graveyards are spectacular all through here. Um, so they left ye goodly pleasant city, which had been the resting place near 12 years. But they knew they were pilgrims and looked not much on those things, but lift up their eyes to ye heavens, their dearest country, and quieted their spirits. So um, I did go to Jamestown on a tour quite a long time ago, and then up through the Blue Ridge Mountains. Yeah, I started that one in Atlanta and ended up in DC. So there's William Bradford, governor and historian of the Plymouth colony. There you go, and he died in New England in 1657. I have never been to the Outer Banks. Edwina, I have never been out there. And what really interests me out there is that fabulous, is that fabulous dialect they apparently speak in some of those communities, which is a very old form of English. So, um, oh, I can't pick a favorite place in the States. I'd feel badly about that. You will notice that I have spent time sleeping on portalages, though, in Zion Park. I mean, I love coming to New England, and I really like New Englanders. I really mean, you know that old saying, you're moving somewhere and say, are the people nice? Well, how did you find them in the last place? Like, I like everyone, just about. But I particularly enjoy New England. There's a bright sense of humor and it's fun food. The climate is very different from what I live in. Of course, I live high up in a mountain. So I've often said if I were sort of told I was going to live in the United States the rest of my life, I think probably my state is Utah. And for the next hour, I'd like to share my faith with you all. Now, I think Utah for all the outdoor stuff. I mean, the fact that you can be up skiing deep powder and then down climbing, pretty spectacular. Now, I'm a bit of an Alaska guy too. It's really that I'm more of a Yukoner at heart. So I always say if I left Banff at home, then I would move up to Yukon, even though I've had the honor and the pleasure of traveling most of the world. But yeah, Utah is, yeah, it's in, the blue sky. But in terms of driving on this particular trip, if I had to live up in New England, I mean, Montpelier is pretty appealing. I really like Acadia Park, but I've never been there in the winter. Portland, Maine. That's a neat town. I have been to Tahoe. Yeah, I actually rode a bicycle there once. There's up to the other main street. So I'm just down on Water Street here. So if you scan out on the map, you'll see how small it is. The big Founders Memorial. I'll take a picture up there. I would be. Then we could go dancing and gambling. But I will take a picture up at the big granite memorial and put it on the Facebook group afterwards. So I'll be very happy to do that. But let's just wander down to the water. And yeah, so I mean, it's fairly soon. Um, did you lucky you, Tom? But as my trip is coming, this is my second last day with my group. So tomorrow, I will try and put up a tour in Salem. I just, because of the weekend traffic that all the Bostonians will know about, I kind of haven't put one up yet just to work out which order we're going to do it in. So I've had so much fun with my driver, Mario from La Ville de Quebec, but again, he doesn't speak English. He's never been here before, so I'm trying to pick easier routes. But it's been really fun for him, and he's loving it here. So I'm just going to work out how that day goes tomorrow. And then, yeah, on the 4th, I take people, which, oh, you burned me up. See, that wasn't cut here. Have a look at that sky. Now, I'm really not too hungry, but I do have about an hour 45. Ooh, I think that might be a loon down in the water there. Here's a cormorant, 2 of them cleaning themselves. I think that other one, I keep watching. Look at these gorgeous birds. They're lovely. But I am thinking, because I'm going to go start to have city food, I might just need another bowl of lobster bisque or some chowder. It might be a little too early for another one of those New England IPAs. I've been doing my very best to try every single one of them. Oh, Marlene, you would too, I'm sure. But let me come back and just give everyone one more spectacular image of the Mayflower 2. And people are having wicked good, lots of questions about the ship itself because it is amazing to think how small it was. Of course, when Columbus came over, there were 3 ships in their original movement. I would imagine life would have been quite pleasant on the Mayflower insofar as people were, as per the plaque, so religiously driven that it would have been, of course, and they paid for it. Isn't that a spectacular view? Whereas, of course, what happened through here, and we talked about it in Newport the other day, and if I can do a tour in Salem, then I'm going to come right back to the old triangle. The ships would leave here with products of the New World. They would actually go over to Africa, sell the products from here, and then pick up humans. Then they would bring the humans back to the Caribbean islands, and they would sell them to particularly Haiti, Dominique, Cuba, and then they would pick up rum and sugar and bring that up to here. So if you go to Newfoundland, for example, the national drink of Newfoundland, Marlene, is Screech. Screech is really the bottom. Okay, Tracy, thank you. The bottom of the barrel of the old rum, because sometimes the ships would sail up to St. John's before making the crossing. So that's the tradition of the Screech. And so when you go to Newfoundland, you get screeched in. Oh, Connor, is that right? So the one thing I didn't do on this trip that was part of my plan was sandwich. And I didn't do it because we got stuck, unfortunately, in the tunnel in Boston for an hour and a half, and it was so late by the time we got down onto the Cape. But sandwich is just, for anyone who can see it on the map, is just across the Bourne Bridge, right? Just across, and you descend out. Yep, the Glass Museum. And I have taken groups to the glass blowing there before. I strongly recommend, if you ever get into glass blowing, don't inhale. But oh, thanks, Janice. Yeah, but sandwich is so attractive, and it's down in a valley rather than being maritime, so it's got a little bit of a different Cape Cod feel. But 100% you're in Cape Cod. It's the one thing that I haven't been able to do for my group, and everything else was on the plan. But yeah, those 2 bridges in the canal, because between me and Plymouth historically was actually considered part of the Cape, but they cut the canal through, so there's a canal that comes through here to New Bedford down there. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to come and walk around. So I do want to recommend that restaurant one more time because I will take a good local recommendation. Um, Polly, yeah, was that and in Venice they do it as well, right? I've taken groups there, but the Czech beer, I have been to the Czech Republic, and yeah, I think I just can't remember it very well no, because of the beer, but it was great fun. Thank you, everyone. It's so nice to connect, and I really do mean it. Like it's so much fun being back here. Like I don't know if the fellow at the museum earlier really did remember you or not. He probably had my name in file, but he's like, "Oh, you've made it back! It's so great the border's open." Like that's how warm and polite people are here, and sort of just genuine. And even though you've got such a high level of education, there's still this kind of slower pace to things. So aside from the driving, which I keep referencing back to, they really get a balance correct in this part of the world. So let's just wander around. Oh, this is where. Sorry, it's just cutting down. Thanks, Cynthia. Thank you very much. It's very interesting. There's a couple of spots where it bounces around. Um, Lobster Hut. Oh, that's over, Tracy. That's over in the parking over there, isn't it? Lobster Hut. Exactly what you're talking about. And I will take your advice. Do you want to listen to the gentleman for one sec? You're probably not going to be able to hear him. Yeah. Okay, I do know the one you're talking about because I used to park the bus over there. So, where's drivers in Malta? Do you know, Tom, it's so funny because Boston does have that kind of tough reputation. Now, Louis C.K. always talks about growing up there and everything. But also, I think you have some of the densest amount of centers of higher learning, right? So it's actually, quite a famous city for education. You're very welcome. I just want to get you one more framed photo. If you want to hang on, and if you don't, that's just fine, of course. But one more framed photo of the Mayflower. It is I'm thrilled to come back here. Well, in hospitals, that's right. And yeah, strong connection with all of that sort of education. But these are still good examples, reproductions of what the early houses would have looked like. These would have been, you're welcome, Meryl. These would have been very, very precarious settlements in their early days. Well, I mean, the BPL, Tom? I don't know what that is. But if it's the Boston, public, yes, the public library, sorry. Yeah, on tours I do, go stop up front of it, absolutely. Yeah. And yeah. And actually, a neighbor of mine, interestingly, hey, merci Nathalie, well, not an old neighbor of mine, but a friend of mine who's the head of the emergency hospital, was actually running on the year when that terrible attack happened, and they actually named him in their local newspaper because he went and gave help, and didn't say anything to anyone, but they figured out who he was and published a thing. So that's pretty neat. So have a view there. So on that sort of final meaningful note, there's the Cape. Stand on your tippy toes, Janice, and we'll say hi. So I just want to say to everyone, I do like the pacifism of the early pilgrims. So I want to say peace and love. Thank you. Thanks, Tracy. Thank you, everyone. It was a real pleasure, and it's so nice to share it with all of you. And thank you for your support. Fun next. That's lovely, darling. On the upcoming tours. Oops. There it's bouncing. There we go. But I will be trying to get home on the 5th. So I'll have the tour on the 4th. I do look for one tomorrow, but I'll have to put it up pretty last minute. On the 5th, I don't know. I've got an hour and a half in Toronto, and they're saying 2.5 hours to get through customs. So we'll see what time I get home. I don't actually have tours up 5, 6, or 7. I'm doing a private tour for a couple of days. So, but the 8th, then I will be there for the Calgary Stampede, everyone. What a totally different feel from refined New England. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen. So go enjoy some chowder and drive your car up to Boston. I promise not to do a Boston accent on the tour tomorrow. I'm staying in chowder, but the chowder is probably what I'll have for lunch, or a lobster roll again. So all the very best. It is a bad weekend to fly. That's why I put it off to the 5th. I could have actually gotten away on the 4th. So, all right. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Gorma Haugut. Thank you very much. Obrigado. A très bientôt. Toda. White, Seth. Tupananchiskama. Arrivederci. Sing us all being Little Italy.